Okay, I'll now hand over back to the chair.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Move on to declaration of interest and any conspiracy statements. We're happy with them. Okay. Let's see.
Oh, I've got one. Councillor Yule.
Councillor Yule.
We'll move you along to another seat.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. It's a transparency statement. I am a member of Cycling UK, which lobbies on behalf of cyclists, and there are a number of items on the agenda where I believe that would be relevant. Having considered the objective test, I do not intend to withdraw. I also am a member of the AA, which lobbies on behalf of motorists, and having in relation to a number of, that's relevant in relation to a number of agenda items. Having considered the objective test, I do not intend to withdraw.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands, so we'll move on to minutes of the previous board meeting. Is everyone happy with that? Yep, I think that's accepted. So we'll then move on to item 2, which is a presentation by Duncan Cameron, who's the Managing Director of First Bus, on ticketing initiatives in the bus industry. So I'm going to pass over to Duncan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, apologies for not being there in person. I had a pre-arranged appointment in Glasgow today, hence why I'm joining remotely. Do you want me to share? You don't have the pack to share. Do you want me to share my presentation on screen?
Yes, please.
Can everyone see that?
Yes, that's it coming through now.
Okay. So what I wanted to take you through today was just a bit of an update, really, in terms of how First have been getting on over the past 6 months. Understand you received a similar presentation in terms of health of the bus industry about 6 months ago, so I'm not going to delve all the way back into pre-COVID times. Maybe just focus on the last few months as to the action we've been taking, what the opportunities are, what the challenges are with First in Aberdeen at the moment. Cover off tap and cap and specifically talk about more up-to-date progress, taking tap and cap a stage further to tap on, tap off, and the benefits that will bring our business and our customers in Aberdeen. Can I just check, has that moved on to the 3rd slide, reading background contactless fares and capping?
Yes, it has.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so if we go back to 10 or so years ago, maybe, one of the big obstacles for a bus user in Aberdeen, if you weren't a regular bus user, is you would have expected to have the correct fare, because Aberdeen has historically had a vaulted operation and no changes given. So unless you want to pay a lot more, not get change from £10, for example, you would be asked to have the correct fare unless you were a regular customer with prepaid tickets. And what we introduced probably across first back in 2017 was contactless payments, and that then removed the need to have exact change. It removed a lot more reliance on cash, and really helped remove that obstacle. And it was one thing that infrequent bus users or non-bus users needed to know in advance. As long as they had a debit or a credit card, they were able to make payment for infrequent trips. So that came in 2017. And what we've started to do over the years is introduce capping in different forms. Capping in its infancy was introduced in 2019 in Aberdeen, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. And then tap on, tap off, which is very much like using the Oyster product in London, whereby you have to tap your card on to enter the underground or tap your card off, and you will be charged a fare up to a maximum limit, whether that's the day ticket or the weekly ticket. And we've been introducing that technology over the last few years. So not only does that provide a lot more flexibility for our customers, but what it also does, and this is really important because you'll hear bus operators talk about this a lot, we do share road space with other traffic, and congestion is one of the biggest obstacles facing the bus industry. So the introduction of capping has removed the interface with the driver, and certain elements of capping has also reduced or removed the ticket printing time. So what that's ultimately done is made a significant reduction in dwell time, and all that dwell time adds up. So by reducing that dwell time by a fraction, you're actually helping to speed up the journey time, which makes the journey much more attractive for existing and future customers. But in principle, capping, in terms of the flexibility it offers customers, it allows customers to travel multiple times per week, and they are safe in the knowledge that without knowing or buying a weekly ticket in advance, they can use their debit or their credit card, and they know it will charge them no more than the day ticket price or the weekly ticket price, depending on what they've travelled. So back in 2019, this was all pre-COVID, and yes, was disturbed quite a bit, as you'd imagine, from the COVID pandemic. But what we introduced in Aberdeen was flat fare capping, where customers, it was branded as tap and cap, and customers were given the opportunity to tap on. So it really suited customers. There's two fares in Aberdeen. Currently, the second longest single fare is £3.05. So whereas before somebody might have made a contactless payment and spoke to the driver and got a ticket for a £3.05 fare, they instead just needed to tap their card on as they were boarding the bus. So therefore the dwell time was much quicker, and they knew that they were getting charged £3.05 if they were making that single journey. If they were therefore making two journeys, they were going to get charged no more than the day ticket, which is less than the two journeys combined. And if they were going to make multiple journeys that week, and the total of all those capped journeys were going to be higher than the weekly ticket price, they know they were going to get capped at no higher than the weekly ticket equivalent. So much more flexibility for the customer, and quicker boarding speed as a result. Sorry, I'm just trying to move the slide. And you can see there the results in terms of boarding time improvements. That graph is taken from the first year of 2019, the first financial year. Roughly the dwell time starting off sitting somewhere between 18 and 20%. And sorry, that percentage is a percentage of total journey time. So about a fifth of the end-to-end journey time is the bus sitting at the stop. And what the capping has actually reduced is it has brought down that dwell time by about 4 or 5%. Sorry, brought down total journey time by about 4 or 5% and brought down total dwell time by about a quarter. So I had a significant improvement in the amount of time the bus was sitting at a stop. What we've moved on over the years since, we've introduced this in Glasgow 12 months ago, and we have recently introduced it into Aberdeen as well over the past year, and that is tap on, tap off, or what's otherwise known as variable fare capping. So that involves a second reader being installed in the vehicle. So the customer taps their card with the driver when they board. Again, no need for any interface or to wait for a ticket to be printed. The customer then gets off the bus, and before the customer gets off the bus, the customer is required to tap on the second reader at the exit. And that allows us to offer a much broader ticket product range through this mechanism. For instance, because we know where the customer is getting off, if they're only making one journey, in the case of Aberdeen, where there are 2 different fares for single fares, if it's the shortest fare, we know they can be charged the shortest fare because we know where they've departed the vehicle. So customers are charged for the distance they've travelled, but as I'll talk about later on, it also gives us more opportunity to offer discounts and a lot more flexibility in terms of the fare offering that we can offer our customers. And as I say, it's very, a very similar example would be what's well known across TfL and the Tube and bus in London with the Oyster product. So, as I was alluding to there, lots of benefits with tap on, tap off technology. We can remove penalties to the customer on the fare structure. So, for instance, at the moment in Aberdeen, we have introduced through tap on, tap off a 2-journey discount. So at the moment, somebody might pay if they were making that longest second fare journey of £3.5. If they did that in 2 directions, that would be a total of £6.10, when in actual fact, we've introduced a 30% discount for that. So we've got the ability to vary with quite a bit of agility through the technology to introduce those discounts. We've got the data to understand where customers are travelling, and that's obviously really key because it allows us to focus our network, focus our frequency, and focus our footprint on where people want to travel. And we've always known where customers have boarded the bus. It's always been a challenge as to where they've been getting off. But the fact they need to tap off to get off the vehicle gives us much more data, and that richness of data is going to allow us to design a better service for that's closer aligned to our customer needs in the future. No printed tickets, which again reduces the dwell time. We've actually, I don't know if you're aware, but separate to this, we have also, and I think most of the other operators have followed suit, we've agreed with Transport Scotland, with their full support, that for concession tickets, we will not issue a ticket, and that is purely to speed services up and reduce that dwell time, because the ticket printing time probably takes about 1 to 2 seconds for every transaction. So with further passengers travelling on Toto, that saving is going to be enhanced. Going forward from tap on, tap off, we now have tap on, tap off both in Aberdeen and in Glasgow. What we are determined to do, when you speak to a lot of passengers, when you speak to local authority and Transport Scotland officials, when you speak to passenger representatives, everyone talks about an integrated ticketing product. So really the panacea is not just for us to be offering a tap on, tap off payment mechanism, but it's really for other operators within our operating area to do the same. And hopefully we can offer multi-operator capping, which would allow those customers to travel on more than one operator, not to be penalised in terms of the ticket price for doing so. Obviously in Aberdeen we have Grasshopper, and in Glasgow we have what's called a tripper product. So in both our Scotland operations we have an integrated ticket in place, but it generally, it's a card, it requires pre-purchase, and again, it doesn't offer the flexibility that multi-operator capping will offer in the form of tap on, tap off, whereby the customer doesn't need to know what the fare is in advance, doesn't need to purchase anything in advance, but has the confidence and is safe in the knowledge that the ticket the cost to them at the end of the day or their week's travel is the best value possible. I think this slide really highlights how far First have come really with tap on, tap off in Scotland. It doesn't exist in many places elsewhere down south. We're probably leading the way out with London, and we're very much looking at what is happening with Project Coral in the West Midlands, which will hopefully develop that specification on multi-operator capping, which will allow us to take tap on, tap off in Aberdeen to the next stage with other operators to offer the best value on a tap on, tap off basis for anyone using more than one bus company to travel. Just some insights there in terms of what customers have said as a result of the tap and cap option being brought in. It's proved advantageous. I think there's evidence here which supports my point at the start, whereby you don't need to know the fare in advance, you don't need to buy any ticket in advance, and the capping has really grown. It's now the largest percentage. It's about 44% of all payments taken through contactless payments. I'm happy to share these slides round after. I'll agree with Rab how I can send those on. I'm not going to spend too much time on some of this detail, but you can see there that the average trip price has been brought down by customers who in Aberdeen last year instead of they've made multiple single journeys, and therefore their average price has involved some capping at the day price rather than simply multiples of the single, which would have been had tap on, tap off not been there. We were actually, this has been really, this graph's quite encouraging. This graph actually indicates the growth that we were getting. We were getting more customers using the bus more often because the day cap was actually growing at a higher rate than the single cap. That's actually tailed off because, believe it or not, a number of students were using the product, but the growth in under 22s has slowed down. The growth in under 22s and the switch to the free under 22 card has slowed down the growth in the Aberdeen tap and cap day, but it does actually give us, you know, real encouragement that this product and this payment mechanism is encouraging more and more people to travel with us, which is what we all want. So just a slide there, really evidencing what tap on, tap off with the second reader in Aberdeen allows us to offer our customers. Previously, if they were making 2 short trips, they would be paying 2 times the short trip price, whereas now they'll automatically get a 40p discount on the total charge to their card if they make 2 short trips. Similarly, it's a 50p discount if it's 1 long and 1 short trip, and an even bigger discount if it's the 2 long trips. What we're also looking to do, we're operating a trial in Glasgow next month, where we have, through our mobile ticket since COVID, as you would expect, we had to, with hybrid working and a number of customers only maybe commuting 3 days instead of 5 days, we've introduced a number of bundle tickets, and these were initially brought on to our mobile ticket offering. So we're going to roll that into tap on, tap off. So if customers make multiple trips over a 5-day period, but they are confined to 3 days, they will get the equivalent of the 3-day bundle price, as opposed to what would have probably been capped at the weekly ticket price, a higher price. So we are just evidence there that we are working to introduce more and more pricing models into the tap on, tap off technology, which should help customers, regardless of their travel pattern, obtain the best value. So I appreciate that's a bit of a whiz through. As I say, I'm happy to send this on, but I hope I've given a bit of a flavour of the main benefits of tap on, tap off. We'll be working with our operator colleagues on both our Aberdeen and Glasgow networks across Scotland to roll out multi-operator tap and cap over the next 12 to 18 months. And as I say, we believe it's resulted in some good growth in Aberdeen, which is great to see. I just want to finish by giving everyone a bit of an overview in terms of the Aberdeen business. You know, we are getting good growth from passenger numbers. Tap and cap and now tap on, tap off has played its part. But you won't be surprised to know the under 22 growth has been a major contributor. So, you know, we're now carrying more passengers than we were in 2019-20 pre-COVID, which is great. There's not a lot of public transport operators can say that. There's not a lot of businesses that can say that. And the growth and the rollout of the under 22 scheme has been critical to that. We have worked very closely with Transport Scotland I know there was some issues in terms of the understanding of the scheme and the rollout and the issuing of passes, but we've worked very hard with Transport Scotland. We've supported their marketing campaign. We've spent money on our own marketing campaign, and it's paying dividends in terms of the growth in under 22 passengers, which is right for the future, and hopefully those people will continue to travel by bus even when they get beyond the age of 22. We've also introduced our own understand how to use the bus and how to use the app, our First Bus app. That's been quite a well-publicised campaign as well, and that's starting to pay dividends. We've got more app users, which is really, really important, because the app is the best interface we can have with individual customers. Not only can we provide them with the best value tickets, but in the face of any disruption or late running vehicles, customers should be able, using the app, to get up-to-date, real-time live information, which is, I use it myself, it's so crucial. We are overcoming the driver shortage issue. We still want to employ more drivers for the reason I've explained, because passenger numbers are growing. But reliability is much more improved, and I would say disruption is probably back to pre-COVID levels. We had a very difficult summer, and you'll have heard any sector looking to employ frontline staff has struggled. I don't think the bus industry is alone, but we in Aberdeen, we've come out of that. We had a tough summer, but reliability is much healthier, which is great, and we really want to keep increasing driver numbers so we can support and not suppress that passenger growth. And then just to add to the customer offering and our environmental responsibilities, I'm really looking forward to welcoming 24 electric zero-emission buses into the fleet later on this summer, and that will see the amount of zero-emission buses on our network in Aberdeen, including the hydrogens, up to 40% in the network. So real great progress. We have a company-wide commitment that all our fleet will be zero emission by 2035, and I'd very much hope Aberdeen gets there long before that. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to present. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to take any questions, but if I am, I'm more than happy to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Duncan. I'll open up to any questions. Angela Hutchinson.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It's very interesting. I was just wondering, you've mentioned about single tickets there. I know it's just, I know your tickets, you've got short and long fare stages, short and long journeys fares. Do you have a breakdown of what proportion of them are short journeys and what proportion of them are long journeys? Because I've never quite got in my head quite exactly how far 2 stages is in practice when I'm getting on at a random bus stop in town, for example.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I remember sorry, excuse the pun. I think that's a very appropriate remark. I remember we used to display what the 2-stage different prices were at the stops, and it still meant nothing because nobody was aware of how far they're travelling. The short answer is I don't have that information on me. I'm certainly happy to share it, and I'm also happy to share how we can probably share some graphics how the tap-on, tap-off technology will provide customers with better value. One thing I should have said, it will also give us the agility to move away from a reliance on those simple, hard 2-stage fares. we will, because it's digitized, we will be able to potentially move to an airline pricing model. So we'll potentially be able to drop, you know, where we feel we've got unused supply at certain times in the evening, for instance, we'd be able to drop the fare right across the board substantially. So I can't reiterate how much agility this technology gives us, but I'm certainly happy to send on some stats in relation to the question you've asked.
Thank you very much for that. It was just kind of, because the follow-on bit about the airline pricing and looking at changes going forward kind of makes a bit more sense, because I was just looking at your ticketing pricing. I got the tap-on side of things. The tap-off seemed to have just, if it was only really for those making the shorter journeys, it really seemed to apply. But if you're looking at different pricing options going forward, that makes a lot more sense in terms of future use of that as well. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, the rollout in Aberdeen, I mean, we're only 2 weeks into it, so we're pretty limited in the ticket offering, as you rightly point out. But it will grow to offer customers much more products.
Okay, Councillor Young.
Thanks. First, thanks for a very informative presentation. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about how you are or are planning to publicise tap on, tap off to not so much your existing customers, who presumably will have information available on buses and so on, but more your potential customers who it will all be a mystery to.
Yeah, we need to, we rolled out an advert. So I go back to that campaign on how to use the bus, how to understand using the bus, how to use the app, how to get as much information at your fingertips. It was covered a lot in that, but I think that campaign you probably didn't see because we didn't have tap on, tap off technology in Aberdeen at the time, so it'd have been focused in the Glasgow area. But we've our marketing spend has gone up considerably over the years. We've got a very strong and capable marketing team. You know, I'm a bus industry veteran, I'm a bus industry professional, but I'm quite proud to say that the majority of the marketing team have all come from outside because they've got new ideas and know what works in different sectors. So I think I would imagine it will be a continuation of what we've done elsewhere, Councillor Yule. It will be TV, it will be social media. Those will probably be the two biggest mechanisms we'll use. And we'll, you know, as I say, we're getting more, the more digitized we become, the more data we're obtaining, and therefore we're able to test, you know, the impact of that data or of those campaigns.
Thank you. I've got another question, if that's okay. It's without wishing to appear a Luddite. Are you still going to be able to cope with, let's not be ageist here, someone who really does want to pay cash?
Yeah, we've certainly no intention of removing the need to pay cash at the moment. I think we need to make sure we are able to cater for all customer types. I know moving away from cash had its concerns, and whilst it's still available, it's come down significantly. I'm just going to, thought I had a stat actually at my fingertips, but no. Yeah, the cash taken's come down considerably, and we've not had any you know, it's not caused, you know, these changes that have been introduced, whether it be contactless, whether it be tap on, tap off, we've not had much pushback, I have to say. So but yeah, certainly no intention to remove paying by cash at the moment. And you know, anything we do remove we obviously would want to go about it very, very carefully, because what we don't want to do is lose passengers. We can't afford to lose passengers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was interested to know what percentage of customers still used cash, and partly coming on to the other consideration which I had was around different people have different or even several sometimes cards that they use, some on apps that they have on their phone and so on. So there is a bit of management that people would have to do using the card. My husband is a big fan of the app, by the way, he really does. It really does work for him. And I just wondered if because sometimes people do get a bit muddled about what they're doing, that they might miss out on some of the technologies that are used, or also in my own case, sometimes you forget to take your pass with you, or you want to use cash, and that's absolutely fine, but it can lead to a bit of discussion with the driver sometimes, and I just wondered if that that side of it. I mean, you've heard anecdotally about some behaviours with drivers, and I just wondered if sometimes these things have got an unintended consequence, which is sometimes to make you sit a little bit longer at the stop. I've certainly been in Glasgow where somebody is pitched up without a card and then tried to blag their way on, and it does take a bit of time to deal with them. So from that point of view, is that something that you've seen an increase in either Glasgow or in Aberdeen?
I think Councillor MacDonald, there's probably a few points to that answer. First of all, cash now in Aberdeen is under 3.5%, so it's very, very small now from where it was. And at the start of 2019, when we introduced tap and cap in its infancy, it was probably about 19%. So there's been a lot of changes. COVID as well, we encouraged customers, it was a COVID prevention measure as well to encourage a reduction in cash. So COVID itself has sped up the reduction in cash, but it's very small now. I think it's a fair point you raise in terms of what the issues faced at the stop. I think we've got a role to ensure that whilst there is less interaction with the driver is not there. And driver's got a very challenging job, but I don't want to give the impression, we're allowing our drivers to be complacent. Whereas 10 customers might have got on previously and all had to speak to driver, only 8, as many as 8 are now capping, and it's a very quick transaction. Those 2 that then have issues, it's really important that the driver supports those where possible. And I think I would argue that the reduction in dwell time, yes, you might have a customer who has an issue. You have customers whose concession cards don't work, or they don't apply them properly, or they just put their wallet down and it doesn't read the concession card. But if we're speeding up all the other transaction times, then I think, as that graph showed, I think we're pretty comfortable that across the board we are reducing the transaction time. A couple other points I would make. Yes, people forget their pass, people forget their card, but we're in a much better place than we were 10, 15 years ago, where all you could do is pay with cash. So even if you forget one payment mechanism, you've probably got another one to compensate and replace with. And then, I would just say mobile ticket still has a really prominent role to play. So those customers who use us on a very regular basis, having the mobile ticket is a big benefit. And actually the transaction time just the technology, the transaction time with a mobile scan is quicker than any contactless payment. So we shouldn't forget that either.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Reid.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks very much for this report. Really interesting, especially good to hear about the figures, the users going up. That's going against the grain, certainly in a lot of areas I've heard about. From an Aberdeen perspective, really interested to hear about your multi-operator tap and cap coming out in 2024. So if you don't mind, can you tell me how discussions are going with Stagecoach currently, and when it's introduced, will it be introduced on a couple of routes initially, or are you expecting a full rollout right across the Shire?
Yeah, so just I think it's important we manage expectations. We've not reached the stage of any discussions with Stagecoach at that level. So 2024, that point there was sort of a broad point across the UK. But obviously Stagecoach would be the ones we would be reliant upon working alongside, because they're the major operator in Aberdeen along with ourselves. But yeah, at this stage we've only just ourselves launched tap on, tap off, so we've not reached any discussions. But you know, I want to make the point, and I want to reiterate this, and this applies across Scotland. I deliberately referred to a tripper product in Glasgow, which we operate alongside McGill's, alongside Stagecoach, and obviously we've got Grasshopper and Stagecoach. We are absolutely determined to offer multi-operator capping. I want to attract non-users. We need to make it as simple as possible, and that means the ticket price or the ticket product needs to be as seamless as possible. In an ideal world, I mean, doesn't apply in Aberdeen, but in an ideal world, I would like to see in Glasgow, where you've got an underground and you've also got a large suburban rail network, that it covers those modes as well. So yeah, unfortunately we haven't commenced discussions yet, but we certainly want to achieve that for Aberdeen.
Yeah, thanks. If I could just come back quite quickly. Yeah, that's great. I completely agree with you. That would, if you can make it as seamless as possible, that's fantastic. I know so you're saying you haven't commenced them at all, but if everything were to go according to plan, when would we be expecting? Nothing that we're going to hold you to, but when could customers in Aberdeenshire be expecting something similar, whereby they can get on a bus and then they can go straight in the city, and then they can go straight onto another destination, just tapping?
I'm not in a position to comment, because I don't know on what Stagecoach's plans are. I'm afraid. Sorry.
Fair enough.
Okay, I've got just one last question. What happens if someone doesn't check off the bus? Does it just go to the highest fee for the day?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, that's what would happen. And we measure that, and ultimately you might think it's in our interest to allow it to happen, but that just isn't sustainable long term. So one of the jobs after it was launched 2 weeks ago, there'll be a high proportion of people trying to work out how to use it, despite our attempts to promote it. But we will also we measure those not tapping off, and driving that number down is a key metric as well.
Okay, I see no other questions. So I'd thank Duncan for the presentation and some good answers coming from the questions there. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to now move to 3.1, the 22-23 budget matters, and that's Ella Storp.
Thank you, Chair. This Budget Matters report provides an update on Nestrans budget monitoring for 22-23 and forecast outturn position. Appendix 1 details the summary position as at the end of February, showing expenditure to date of 2.535 million, and the operating surplus is forecasted at 341,720 pounds. This information is before virements and carry forwards from Appendix 2 and 3. Appendix 2 sets out a list of virements proposed for the remaining financial year. Appendix 3 lists additional projects to be carried forward into 23-24 to the sum of £186,987. A further extension has been granted for pensions discretion policy, and a report is to be prepared for the board to review in the next meeting, and the policy to be submitted by end of June. The report contains an update in projects for which Nestrans receives external grant funding. Due to competing priorities and resourcing issues, full use was not made of adult grant funding, and the final claim for 22-23 is 15k. However, carry forward additional allocation in 23-24 has been approved. In relation to Local Rail Development Fund, despite that the deadline for claiming against the grant has passed as reported in September board, a claim of £6,283 has been submitted as advised in March by Transport Scotland. It is anticipated that the full active travel grant of 640k for 22-23 will be claimed from Transport Scotland, and an update will be provided in the next board meeting. And there's no change in relation to the Strategic Transport Fund, with the current position staying at £484,594. There are 6 recommendations for the board to approve. Note the monitoring position and forecast presented in Appendix 1, approve the environment set out in Appendix 2, approve the continuation of funding to next financial year to complete approve the projects presented in Appendix 3, note the update on the pensions discretion policy, note the updates on projects for which Nestrans has claimed external grant funding, and note the Strategic Transport Fund position. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions? No, there's no questions. So take the board to recommend 1 to 6 of the recommendations on page 12. That's agreed. Thank you. So we'll keep with yourself and move on to 3.2, which is the 23-24 budget update.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update in 23-24 budget. So the budget approved in February was based on anticipated funding maintained at the previous year's level. Now the fundings for coordination and project development budget have been confirmed, along with the further continuation of funding from Appendix 3 in Budget Matters report and the Path for All grant. This will bring the overall budget to £1,264,390. Appendix 1 sets out a couple of environments proposed for the approved budget due to project variance already identified in predicted outturns. In relation to Strategic Investment Programme budget, the total funding confirmed by Council partners is 295,000 less than anticipated level. However, both councils have confirmed that the remaining historic grant will still be able to draw down next year, and around 171k of which is not currently allocated against projects agreed for carry forward. It's therefore proposed to use the remaining council-held historic allocation in full, along with the reserves to maintain the budget approved in February. There's around 0.5 million unearmarked reserves reported in 21-22 accounts. Should this be agreed, along with the further continuation of funding from Appendix 3 in Budget Matters reports, this will bring the overall budget to £5,423,525. So there's 3 recommendations to approve. Note the funding awards to Nestrans that have been confirmed for 23-24, approve the environments set out in Appendix 1, and agree to usage of any unallocated funding within the remaining historic grant held by the councils, along with reserves to address the current shortfall in the budget that was approved in February. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions? Okay, I see no questions, so we'll move to the recommendations that the board accept, the 1, 2 and 3 on page 20. Okay, thank you very much for them presentations, and we'll move on to the next subject. We now move on to, Angela Perry for the annual audit plan 22-23.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. May I introduce myself? My name is Angela Peary and I'm a director at Grant Thornton. I apologise for my voice. I'm just recovering from COVID, so it's not as strong as it usually is, so I apologise in advance. As noted, this is our plan for 22-23. I'd like to thank officers for their response so far to the audit. Appreciating as new auditors, it's intensive in terms of the level of work that we're required to undertake in year one. What I intend to do is just really talk about the summary of the audit plan, which starts at page 28 of your reporting pack today. So this notes our materiality, and for our materiality, we've chosen 1.9%, which is at the higher end of our materiality levels, given an overall materiality of 69,000. Our performance materiality is chosen as 65%, and that's a little lower than usual. It's appreciating that it's the first time that we're your auditors. In terms of our trivial level at 5%, that's the standard determination across all Grant Thornton audits, and we've set a low materiality of £5,000 for the more sensitive items in the remuneration report. In terms of your significant risks that we've identified, we have management override of controls, and just to note that this is a default significant risk across every client. In terms of other risks that we've identified, the risk of fraud in expenditure is a significant risk. And again, this reflects the nature of your schemes and expenditure, crossing multiple years. So we do enhanced work around the cut-off of transactions. And in addition, as you have IAS 19 pension scheme liability within your financial statements, the work that we do on this, with it being a significant estimate and subject to those estimation processes and judgments, we carry out work on that also. It's worth noting that this year there's minor changes in terms of financial reporting, but from the auditing standards, we have quite a significant change in terms of ISA 315, which is the work that we're required to do in terms of understanding IT controls. So the work that we do on those relevant controls is more enhanced than in previous years. In terms of the wider scope, work that we're required to undertake due to the size of Nestrans, we have applied the wider scope exemption, which is similar to the position from your previous auditors, and this means that we do a reduced piece of work which concentrates on the work on the government statement and financial sustainability. We also still have the duty to report in terms of your performance. In terms of the rest of the plan, I think the only thing that I'll really point out is about the timeline on pages 30 and 31, and pointing out that the timeline for the production of and the audit of the financial statements has moved back to pre-COVID deadlines. So the requirement to produce financial statements by the end of June and for the audit by the end of September also. And the other thing I'll just note is that on page 39, which is about following up your previous auditor's last recommendations, at this stage, that's your response to the recommendation, but we'll do the follow-up in our final report. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions? I don't see any questions, so we'll move to the recommendation to recommend 1, note the audit plan provided by the external auditors. Okay, and Thank you, Angela, for that report.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we'll move on to 4.1, Director's Report, and that'll be Rab.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4.1, as you say, is the Director's Report on liaison between the partnerships and with the Scottish Government and others. There are a number of meetings that have been held since the last meeting, and if I could, I'd like to draw members' attention to a couple of these. The first one on the list is that we have had a workshop kicking off a review of the Health and Transport Action Plan. So it's a number of years since the HTAP was approved by the board, and we felt that with the significant changes there have been around focus, that it was important that we got people together and had a think about what would be the priorities going forward. And that was a really useful meeting in the Cowdray Hall, and we're hoping to work that up and bring a proposed HTAP review to the board later this year. The second one I'd bring to your attention is the Bus Alliance, which met on the 2nd of March, and the note of the minute is there as an appendix for members' information. And the third one, that we hosted the regional transport partnerships, all 7 partnerships meet on a quarterly basis, and it was Nestrans' turn to host. So we had a really useful meeting in Thainston in Inverurie. Being March in Aberdeenshire, of course, we were disrupted by snow, and not everybody was able to be there in person. But I think it's really important that the chairs get together on a regular basis. And I certainly find that a useful meeting. I hope you do, Chair, and gives us an opportunity to raise issues which are probably of consequence to all of the partnerships, rather than just each individual one on their own. The programme of future meetings is there for members' information as well, and the recommendation is that the report is for noting, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments as well. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any questions. So we take the recommendation 1, no progress of liaison arrangements with other RTPs, the Scottish Government and others, and arrangements for further meetings. Thank you, Rab. That takes us on to 4.2, which is the equalities outcomes, and that will be reported by Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to give the board some background in terms of our equalities outcomes and equalities mainstreaming. Now, this is a statutory duty that all public bodies have to do, and we've been doing it over a number of years. Members will also be aware that equalities is one of our 4 key pillars in our RTS, and accessibility for all is one of the strategic priorities. So equalities is important to our day-to-day work as well as these outcomes. We have decided to keep our equalities outcomes the same as what we had 2 years ago, partly because a lot of the data that we collect in terms of monitoring hasn't been collected, again, due to the pandemic, so we don't have that up-to-date data, but also because a lot of the things that we had chosen to do in terms of things like our comprehensive travel study is actually just starting now, and we'll be able to gather that information and hopefully actually fulfill the equality outcome. So the report shows that we have 2 equalities outcomes. One is evidence to provide better understanding about how all people and their protected characteristics in the northeast of Scotland travel, and any inequalities they may face whilst travelling or trying to access transport. And we outline how that links to the RTS and what we're proposing to do. The other one is everyone can access transport safely with an integrated service that provides accessible information, appropriate assistance and support from transport staff. And again, we show what our outputs and activities and how we're going to measure progress on that. In the appendix, we also give a summary of the evidence where we've gathered this information, and we refer to our impact assessments that we did as part of developing the regional transport strategy, the monitoring we do as part of our monitoring report, and also how we work with our stakeholders such as the North East Transport Consultative Forum. We also have a mainstreaming report, which is reporting on the gender balance of this board and also the gender balance of the staff. Due to Nestrans' small size, we don't go down further into the other protected characteristics, so we can't risk identifying individuals. So we've just reported on gender balance, and the gender balance of the board is also reported to the Scottish Parliament. So as a result of this report, I have 3 recommendations. The first is to note the report and the requirement of Nestrans to report on its activities and policies in respect to the Equality Act 2010, approve the Equalities Outcomes 2023, and note the Equalities Outcome Report and Mainstreaming Equalities Report in Appendix 1. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I see no questions. So we go to the board to do the recommendations 1, 2 and 3 on page 71. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly, for that. We now move on to 5.1. They are the ART detailed option appraisals, and that's going to be Kirsty.
Thank you very much. So the purpose of the report today really is to present the findings of the Aberdeen Rapid Transit detailed options appraisal and provide recommendations for the next stages of the project. This comes on the back of the presentation that was provided by Stantec on the findings of this work at the board workshop that was held back in February. I think there was quite a lot of information in that presentation, and I think it was a good discussion, hopefully answered some questions. And this is now the formal reporting of that technical work to the board with recommendations on the next steps. The background, I think members are now fully aware of the background of the ART and the origins of it in the Regional Transport Strategy and the Bus Alliance bid to the Bus Partnership Fund. As I say, this report really presents the findings of that detailed options appraisal funded through the Bus Partnership Fund award, carried out by Stantec, and really an important early stage of the work, really to identify how the ART vision can be delivered within the current legislative environment. I've provided within the report a recap of what the vision for ART entails, the key features of it, and the key features of a bus rapid transit system in general. There's also reference to the glider visit, which members will have heard about previous meetings, the benefits that Belfast are seeing through the glider service. The objectives for ART are set as part of this work and are focused substantially on improving bus speeds on ART corridors, achieving a high level of consistency in journey times across the day and across the week, and improving perceptions of quality of public transport. These objectives sit within the wider context of the objectives of the North East Bus Alliance, really seeking to reverse the sort of long-term trend of declining bus patronage across the North East, and also wider RTS objectives around about substantial mode shift from car to sustainable modes, national targets around net zero carbon emissions and 20% reduction in car kilometres, with ART really being the key part of the strategy to address those. The technical report, which details the full list of options, the full methodology, and all the findings of that detailed options appraisal, is now available on the Nestrans website. There's an executive summary provided in Appendix B of this report. The full technical report is quite lengthy, so we've just put the executive summary as part of this report. And the approach really has been to consider and appraise alternative viable delivery and operational options for ART. I think it's quite essential to focus on these delivery mechanisms in the early stages, because they will then fundamentally determine the other factors of how our ART can be defined, the roles and responsibilities of the different parties involved. As you'll be aware, bus services in Aberdeen are mainly delivered on a commercial, deregulated basis. But there are provisions in the recent Transport Scotland Act around bus service improvement partnerships and new local franchising provisions, which have been looked at, and the development of options for the delivery of ART really is focused on the opportunities that are provided through this. The report sets out and goes through the full appraisal process for a whole range of options, but really 2 options have emerged from this process as being worthy of progression to the next stage, with outline business case and therefore more detailed consideration. The report sets out the most appropriate delivery mechanism for each of these. They're titled here as option 3A and option 5. Obviously, the full references are available in the report. Setting out the most appropriate delivery mechanism for each. And again, I've tried to provide a bit of detail on the key features of those, the bus service improvement partnership versus a franchise agreement. And Appendix A of the report then sets out the key features of each and the associated strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats of each, trying to really attempt to provide a bit of a comparison for you of each of those different approaches. The report also provides a summary of the key outcomes of the appraisal process. They're covered in more detail in the executive summary, but really I think some quite encouraging findings. The report has demonstrated that ART can deliver significant benefits for Aberdeen in terms of a higher quality step change improvement in public transport provision, and it has the potential to significantly increase public transport use and mode shift with associated benefits for the wider economy, environment, social inclusion. There's support for ART amongst local people. There was market research done as part of the process, which was reported at the last board meeting. But it's also demonstrated through the work that's been done that just delivering the bus priority infrastructure alone would not deliver the sought after bus speeds and therefore the likely impact on the likely success of the scheme that of the additional benefits that ART would bring. It's demonstrated that new cross-city services facilitate a significant reduction in public transport travel time, significantly improving accessibility, and has been demonstrated to bring a greater overall benefit than for individual corridors terminating in the city centre. It's demonstrated that reducing the amount of time a bus spends at the bus stop is an essential part of speeding up bus journeys and therefore making it more attractive. And I think that has been demonstrated by Duncan in the previous presentation. But it has also identified really the delivery of ART service will have a significant impact on the underlying bus network, and that this will need to be really carefully and fully explored as we move forward, ensuring there's no overall loss of accessibility. We have it has been demonstrated through the sifting process that you can't simply add ART on top of the existing network. You can't sort of duplicate services, would not result in a success for either the current existing bus services or the ART network. And ART really needs to be integrated as part of that wider public transport system. So that option really, which transplants ART just in addition, has been sifted out as part of this process. To deliver the significant travel time benefits, there will be a resulting impact for general traffic due to the reallocation of road space. However, that sits within the context, highlighting really that sits within the context of the wider commitments to reduce vehicle kilometres, as well as aspirations for safer, healthier, more attractive and accessible streets. The report, I think, addresses quite strongly that adopting supporting traffic restraint measures such as increased management and control of parking alongside the ART scheme is likely to provide additional benefit and help to ensure that success and an overall positive benefit for the scheme. It also highlights ongoing dialogue with businesses and the freight community, as well as access and mobility groups and the general public will be required as we move forward. And as I said earlier, there's really it's focused very much on two main delivery mechanisms available: bus service improvement partnerships, which work in partnership with the current bus operators, or franchise agreements, both of which present very different levels of cost and risk. And as I say, those are outlined in much more detail, I think, in that table in Appendix A. I think it's Appendix A. I think the findings really in the sort of key summary is that the evidence available shows that the BSIP approach is deliverable. It enables progress in the short term, subject to reaching appropriate agreements with bus operators. And progression of that option 3A will require more involved discussion with the bus operators to explore what elements of the ART vision can be achieved through that delivery mechanism. Franchise approach provides additional benefits, but comes with associated timescales, risks and deliverability risks and revenue funding risks. And we believe that further work is required to fully explore the likely cost of a franchise, particularly implications and the costs associated for the wider bus network. But the findings of the technical work to date have demonstrated that whichever delivery mechanism is adopted, ART has the potential to deliver significantly improved public transport journey times and mode shift, and has the potential to be a viable solution. As I say, the project is still at an early stage, but we're recommending that both options 3A and 5 progress to the outline business case, which will allow for more detailed consideration of those financial implications and risks. There will be a requirement to look in more detail at the desired routing of the network and the interchange points, greater analysis of that impact on the wider bus network, and then moving into things such as the vehicle and depot requirements, ticketing mechanisms, branding, and importantly as well, how the benefits to the regional economy can be better quantified through that process. And just finally to say that the Scottish Government's Bus Partnership Fund remains quite a significant opportunity in terms of funding for the next stage. So the recommendations really are to try, there's been quite a lot of work done to this point. I think we've really just to keep the process moving forward, we want to move to that next step, which involves a gateway review with Transport Scotland as part of the Bus Partnership Fund. So we're recommending that the board note the contents of the detailed options appraisal and agree that this be submitted to Transport Scotland as part of the BPF gateway review process, subject to agreement by Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire Councils. Agree to work with the partners of the North East Bus Alliance to continue to develop a BSIP agreement that could support the delivery of option 3A and to explore with the bus operators what could be achieved through this mechanism. In parallel to recommendation 2, to further explore the costs and risks associated with both a BSIP and a franchise approach in order to fully understand the likely financial implications, and to report this back to future meetings of the board and the 2 councils for their consideration. And to agree to progress the study to the outline business case on the above basis, to request funding from Transport Scotland through the BPF for a number of key elements. Really, just to recap, further consideration to establish the desired routing interchange points for ART in order to inform the outline business case, progression of those 2 options to the outline business case based on that agreed network. There will also be requirements for further testing in the Assam model, further investigation and quantification of the wider economic and social benefits that ART may bring to the region, which, although this has done a high level assessment of some of those, I think that there's a lot more detail that can come out from those in those areas. More detailed financial analysis of operating costs and revenues associated with both a BSIP and a franchising approach, to seek funding for recruitment of a BSIP or franchise manager in order to ensure the resources and the expertise are available as we progress, and to request for continued funding for engagement, marketing and communications work stream as an integral part of delivering ART. And finally, to refer this report to the 2 councils for their consideration. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Yoon.
Thanks, Chair. Can I first say thank you for, obviously it's been a massive amount of work that's gone into this, and the clarity of the presentation, both of the report and what we just heard. My question's fairly basic, actually. We just heard a presentation from Duncan Cameron from First about the benefits of tap on, tap off. And in terms of the benefits of ART, one of the benefits is effectively tap on, tap off. So in the comparison between ART and existing services, is that comparisons? I'm not denying there are obviously other significant benefits, but in terms of the dwell time, I'm assuming that the difference there would be less, although still be some benefit if we went with designed new vehicles with multiple entrances or exits.
Yes, it's absolutely, it's part of that picture, and I think it's really great that that technology is progressing, which will enable us to more easily, I think, achieve that. I think when it comes to the benefits of ART, it's that tap on, tap off, a key part of it, that off bus ticketing. It's also the multi-doors, so that actually not everybody's being funneled through the same door within the vehicle. That would help to speed up the process even more. And the other feature really of ART, in addition to the bus priority infrastructure, which really is a really fundamental part of speeding up and making journeys more reliable, is the stopping patterns of the services, and how those can be made more efficient whilst also maintaining accessibility and connecting in with the wider bus network. So I think there's the 3 sort of key features. There's the type of vehicles and the number of the multiple doors, the off bus tap on, tap off ticketing, and the infrastructure. But I think when you look at, for instance, a BSIP approach in partnership with the operators, there's obviously an awful lot that's being done in terms of that technology to enable some of those things to be to be delivered, and obviously are being delivered already. So I think it's a really positive sign, and it's part of the solution.
Convener?
Councillor, you come back.
Yeah, thanks. That's really helpful. A second question. Obviously, option 3A envisages the rebranding of existing buses, and it's, without prejudging what fleets, First, Stagecoach, or whoever might run in the future, my understanding is that existing buses don't have multiple access and exit points as a rule. So that would be, presumably, if we went down that road, no pun intended, we would lose that benefit in terms of dwell time compared to option 5.
Yes, in comparison to the two options, that's one of the differences. But I should just highlight, I suppose, that there's nothing within a BSIP agreement that precludes you from upgrading vehicles. You can obviously do that, but the control of that is not necessarily with the public sector. It's perhaps with the bus operators in terms of their fleet upgrade. There would be much more agreement needed with bus operators in terms of what vehicles they would be looking to sort of operate within their fleet. So it just changes the where those decisions are probably made, but there's nothing that precludes you from introducing multi-door vehicles if you could come to that agreement with the bus operators. But for the purposes of the appraisal, getting to differentiate between the two options, that option has assumed that it would be more likely that there would be potentially an upgrade to the rebranding and an upgrade of the existing bus services. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, and thank you, convener.
Okay, Councillor Davison.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think it's really useful to have this after the presentation that we've just had with the tap on, tap off. And it would be really good to be doing that in conjunction with the Shire so that you found out a lot more about the journeys that people were taking and where the desired routes were, so trying to get people to come from the Shire into the city and then move across the city and help and gather all that information so that you know best which routes to use. And as I said last time, I still have concerns about buses coming in from the Shire and trying to move in tandem with art and whether they would slow the whole system down. So having an integrated system would be far better. But we've never been very good here at changing buses or changing the mode of transport as we move across places. And in other countries and other cities and towns, people quite happily jump off one vehicle onto another one. But that's not a tradition here. And so it's a whole culture change that we have to go through as well. So to get that culture change, we possibly do have to go for a wholesale change of everything so that it's very significant. But it'll be interesting to see the options as they're developed further.
Okay, bringing Colin. That.
Hi, thanks very much. Councillor, you went through most of my questions, but my last part I had was about the difference between 5 and 5P. So on 5 we have no changes in traffic restraint measures. So but my understanding on this was that we were creating clear corridors for for art, but there doesn't seem to be any difference between having no traffic restraint measures and increased parking controls along the routes. Is that it doesn't quite seem to click with me, because if you've got cars parked in there, surely that's going to cause an issue, isn't it?
Yes, all options assume the sort of the implementation of bus priority infrastructure, which will along the corridors you rightly impact on opportunities for on-street parking, probably necessitate the removal of some of that. But I think what they're getting at in terms of increased parking controls really is around about the parking, the overall supply management and control of parking across the city as a whole. Currently, we're seeing that park and ride is not particularly successful because it is easier and possibly even cheaper to park, or even free to park within, at your destination. So I think it's really looking at the sort of the management and the control and the availability of parking within the city centre and within at key destinations rather than necessarily along the corridors specifically, just as part of the overall picture of providing alternative sustainable choices and managing the availability and ease of which you can travel by car.
So we're assuming that everything remains the same then, that the parking will be the same in Aberdeen all the time, but we know, I mean, this is it. You've got external other work already ongoing in Aberdeen about parking and different vehicles. The buses, the tap on tap off scheme. So you have got this in the background. So for 5, you're talking there will be traffic restraint measures along the corridors of where these buses are going. Is that right?
Through the provision and through the reallocation of road space to buses and the provision of bus priority infrastructure. I think the difference really is, I suppose, it's a modelling exercise that they've used the different tests to test the impact of putting in the Aberdeen Rapid Transit System, but then that 5p really is to demonstrate and does demonstrate the additional benefits and the additional support to the viability of ART that you can provide by also managing the control and supply of parking. But the implementation of the bus priority infrastructure would necessitate some control of parking along the corridors, I would suspect.
Okay, all right, thanks very much.
Okay, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much. I must confess, I was a little disappointed with what I read. There's a lot of work has already been said, and thank you for that. But I did feel there was a spark missing somewhere that I've certainly felt with this project over many years, and I just wondered where that underlying aspiration, I guess, of what we want to see in Aberdeen, which is something different and but achievable, and something that is quality. And I think that's maybe something I really didn't get through in this particular report, given that it's very based on technical matters as well around all that comes with that. I'll just park how I feel and come back to, a proper question, I guess. My first one is around the Assam 19 model, and I just wondered if that's how up to date that is in terms of a model that is meaningful given where we are with everything from COVID to roads and studies that we're doing with multimodal, and just the shift and the where we are with hybrid working, all the rest of it. How up to date do we feel that is, just for reassurance?
Well, it was completed relatively recently. It's a post AWPR model. The COVID pandemic has put a spanner in the works, I'm sure you know everything, but it's a post AWPR scenario. It has 2 forecast future scenarios that are sort of dictated by the Scottish Government, and that one is around about, they call it a with policy scenario, where what would happen in the future where all of these Scottish Government's targets for reducing vehicle kilometres by 20%. If that all happens, what does the future look like? And then what they call the without policy scenario, where it's more of a business as usual scenario. What happens? And in the medium term, that results out of an increased congestion, business as usual sort of scenario. So there's 2 different scenarios, and it's the most up-to-date model that we have. It is a recent model. It's been, I think, it's being audited, and actually the ART project is the first use of that model most recently.
Thank you. That is reassuring, Chair, I think, just to have that. My second question was around the tap on, tap off. And my understanding was that that this particular mode of travel might involve buying a ticket before you get onto the bus. Is that changed with tap on, tap off coming into being?
I think what we've always referred to in the vision document is off bus ticketing. Now, what we mean by that, I think, is, you know, in the past, and I think Glider, there was a ticket machine at the bus stop, so you purchase a ticket. But I think the reality, and as the technology and as, you know, the bus operator implementing this tap on, tap off, is that it's off bus ticketing where you don't need to approach the driver and purchase a ticket as such. So it would encompass the tap on, tap off technology, and I think actually that's more likely. You know, you see the trends that the bus operators are seeing in terms of the uptake of that. I think that's actually a much more likely scenario, that it would be a tap on, tap off situation rather than a ticket machine and a purchase. But when we say off bus ticketing, I think it's the no driver interaction purchase of a ticket, and that might be through a pre-purchased travel mobile ticket, or it may be tap on, tap off.
And given what we saw through you, Chair, when we went to Belfast, the design of the halts, as they call them, the platforms, as we're calling them, and that had that encompassed into it, and the machines and so on, will that then reduce the cost, do you think, going forward, because there won't be that necessity for those hubs as well, perhaps at interchanges and so on, or is that something that's being considered?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly been some high-level costing done as part of the work, looking at the construction of halts. I don't think ticket machines is a particularly substantial part of that. I think everything else would remain. There's obviously, and Duncan has referred to this earlier, a step to go to achieve that multi-operator tap on, tap off, and what's specifically involved in that, and the cost involved in that, I think probably need to be fully explored. But I don't think the ticket machines is a particularly substantial part of it, but there are some costings within one of the many appendices, which I can dig out if need be.
Thank you very much. And my last question was really to ask, we found a critical friend when we were over in Belfast who gave us some very good advice, and I just wondered if it would be relevant to get his thoughts on our first big report on what might or might not be possible here in Aberdeen, if that's something that could be considered by Rab or yourself, Kirsty.
If I could tell one, yes, we haven't been back in touch with Clive since just after the visit with the glider people in Belfast. But yeah, I think it would be useful to probably get back in touch with them and let them know the progress that we've made. And I like the phrase critical friend, yeah, to ask if they can advise on where we go from here. Yeah, I see President Biden is checking out the glider today, and I'm sure he'll come back enthused as well. So.
Thank you very much. And, I think there is scope, even with what we've got in front of us, that there may well be changes. I think, this is part of that art journey. And I think, I think that the dream is still there at the moment, but we do need to get this right, because if we really want to make that step change and get those particular people out of their cars and onto this art concept at the moment, it's going to take something that is new and different and quality, and I think that's what people are expecting.
Okay, thanks. Jerry Donald.
Thanks, convener. Couple of points really. I am a bit concerned, like Councillor Ewell, regarding the passenger numbers and the reference to Duncan's presentation earlier, where numbers are going up. I think we need to see evidence that we are actually providing something that's going to make a step change for Aberdeen City and the surrounding areas. That said, it needs to be seamless with existing transport options that feed into the city. I think as Councillor Davidson was referring to. And the final comment I would really make is, in terms of consultation and engagement, are we going far enough and wide enough? Should we be doing more with the major employers within the area to ensure that we are actually getting the public on side? Because ultimately it's the public will determine the success of this or not. Thank you.
Kirsty, would you like to come back?
Yes, I think I just on that public and stakeholder engagement, I think I really agree with that. As part of that initial funding bid, we got quite a substantial amount of money to undertake engagement, marketing, communications, and I think we've made quite significant progress in that. We have engaged with a really large number of businesses and provided the opportunity for that. And as part of our next ask to Transport Scotland, I think will need to be a continuation of that. The current commission's sort of coming to a close at this point in time, but we will be looking in that ask to Transport Scotland to sort of flesh out this is what we need to do in terms of engagement and marketing and communications with the public, with stakeholders as the project progresses, and really continue to treat it as an integral part of the development of the project, because I think agree that it will be critical to successful implementation. So that will be a fundamental part, I think, of that ask to Transport Scotland for the next stage.
Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not going to propose that we do anything different from agree the recommendations, but I just wanted to say again, I'm not a massive fan of option 3, 3B at all, but wouldn't propose that we do anything different from the recommendations.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Obviously, with technology changing over the years, it could well change again yet once technology moves on. So we'll go to the board to recommendations 1 to 5 on page 82 to 83. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to 5.2, Aberdeen to Lawrencekirk multi-modal corridor update, and that'd be Paul Finch.
Thank you very much, Chair. This report updates on the progression of the Aberdeen to Lawrencekirk multimodal corridor study, and it's primarily the Local Rail Development Fund, which we were awarded in August 2019, and we have been working away on that since that time. We've gone through consultation. We've had various drafts of the Case for Change report, which is the first stage of the STAG process, and that is now substantially complete, although just the other day we did receive some more comments from Transport Scotland, which we're working to resolve. The matter of the report, though, is to how do we best integrate that piece of work, which was focused on the Aberdeen to Lawrencekirk corridor, taking a multimodal approach, looking at buses, rail, and active travel, with the requirements to look at a southern corridor approach funded from the Bus Partnership Fund. We had been trying to progress that southern corridor piece of work for a while now, but the Bus Partnership people were saying they would have difficulty in kicking that off whilst the Local Rail Development Fund work was still ongoing. So over the past year, we've been having discussions with Transport Scotland, the rail people, the bus people, our local authority partners, and amongst ourselves, in order to how to take this forward in the most appropriate manner. So the proposals are really to continue with the LRDF study to its conclusion via the preliminary and detailed options appraisal, incorporate within that the multimodal corridor requirements of the Bus Partnership Fund, ensuring that the work continues to consider rail stations, active travel and bus priorities, but have that extra detail that is necessary to take into account what we require from ART and a southern park and ride bus facility. We recommendation that the work takes full account of the findings of previously completed work and ongoing work on the corridor, and that includes some work we did recently on Wellington Road. And obviously, due to the regional and cross-boundary significance of the work, in terms that there are almost balancing issues both in Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire in terms of their complexity or political significance, it would be appropriate for the work to be managed by Nestrans, although with full and proper client team input from officers of Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire, and the reporting requirements would again go through Nestrans and Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire councils. Given those proposals, there are some procurement and financial implications of that namely we're having to, although the broad element of the existing commission we have with AECOM would need to be extended to take into account that greater detail that we required and that we know from experience would be necessary of the bus priority fund requirements, and that's an additional 63,593 pounds in terms of the award. A budget of to cover the estimated cost of completion is allocated in the 2023-24 strategic investment budget predominantly. But we also, that would be fully funded from Nestrans, although previously we did attract additional grant funding from Transport Scotland from the LRDF funding and the Bus Partnership Fund. Transport Scotland aren't clear at the moment on how they're going to continue the LRDF study, but there are a number of studies that are ongoing, and I think they have committed to finding a funding solution for that, as well as the BPF appraisal work had also been attracted funding from Transport Scotland. So we are confident of being able to supplement the grant funding that we have with additional external funding going forward. So that's the proposal, and that's the financial and procurement implications of that. The recommendations are to note the progress on the LRDF fund study, agree that the LRDF fund Aberdeen to Lawrence Kirk study has progressed to its conclusion. The multimodal corridor requirements of the Bus Partnership Fund are incorporated into this study now. The work continues to consider rail, active travel and bus priorities, but to be extended to consider the bus partnership requirements. The work takes full account of previously completed and ongoing work on the corridor, including that work on Wellington Road. And due to the regional and cross-boundary significance of the work, it should continue to be managed by Nestrans with significant client team input from officers of Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire councils. The contractual arrangements for the delivery of the study are extended to accommodate these changes, including an additional fee requirement of £63,593, and to instruct the director to pursue grant funding support for the continuation of the study, commensurate with levels of support previously provided by LRDF and BPF funding award. And in the instance of the BPF funding award, that would be agreed with Aberdeen City Council and the Bus Alliance, because they are the administrators of that fund locally. Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Sorry, Colin over that.
Thanks, Paul. Just the one thing. When are we expecting to have this overall study completed and with options, so we can go on to the next stage? What's the timescale for this?
That's a good question, Colin. The LRDF work, unfortunately, has been mired by difficulties. Some of that was due to COVID, but unfortunately, most recently, we've been delayed by lack of response and issues with our Transport Scotland colleagues who seem not to have the resource available to turn comments around and help us with meetings. So that is sort of, despite the work that we are doing to progress things as quickly as possible, we do appear to be working against a headwind on that respect. I would anticipate that we could get through this in around 12 months without any unnecessary delays.
Yeah, I mean, I again, just from a project point of view, it's good to know what these targets are that we're going for getting these. You know, it does seem to me that we're mired in these ongoing studies and consultations, etc. So it'd be good to get an idea of when expectation or a target date of when we're expecting these things, so we can we can report on that. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, just a comment really, Chair, because it's taken a year to discuss and all the rest. It's going to take another year. It just gets frustrating, I think, when you come to these projects sometimes, and I hear that in Colin Allenach comments as well, and I just wonder, and this is no aspersion onto officers, but what it is that we can do as a regional transport partnership, and it's maybe something that you can discuss when you're speaking to other chairs, because it can't just be us here in the Northeast where it's difficult to move forward with these projects. Maybe there is, resource issue, perhaps at Transport Scotland or whatever it is, but it's very frustrating, and ultimately you get concerned about doing work, and then it becomes less value as time goes on, Chair. So it's just really to have a moan.
Okay, yeah, I can see we can certainly, when we have our next meeting, RTP chairs, bring it up and see if anyone's come up with any other ideas of how they're getting over that problem. There's no other questions there, so we go to recommendations 1 to 4 on page 105, 106. And that's agreed. So we'll then move on to item 7, the progress report. It is Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. There's not normally a covering report for the progress update, but this one's been prepared to discuss the purpose and format of the progress report and to seek advice on any amendments to this format if required in future. The progress report's a standing item on the agenda to provide the board with greater detail on the progress and spend to date on individual projects being funded through Nestrans budgets than it can be provided in the summary information under the budget headings within the Budget Matters report. Updates are also given where known on any projects that are being progressed and funded by others that relate to the policies and actions contained within the Regional Transport Strategy. New information since the last report is added in bold text to enable members to easily see the latest update, and any items without an update are not presented. It was previously suggested that the target for delivery of each project be indicated to identify if a project is behind schedule. The target for delivery for all Nestrans funded projects, however, has always been the current financial year due to the single year funding allocations that are available to Nestrans. The budget information presented therefore makes reference to the total funding available in the current financial year, but it does also note any carry forward a budget from the previous financial year, along with the amount that's been invoiced to date in the current financial year. The direction arrows for each Nestrans funded project then refer to progress within the current financial year alone, and are often positive even if the project is still progressing despite it having slipped from a previous financial year. So the historic slippage is denoted through reference to the budget carry forward from the previous year only. The headings within the report have been renamed to more accurately reflect the information presented. So we're now given a description of the project, the budget, which also includes the spend to date if funded by Nestrans, the current status and future actions. These headings are shown in track changes on this occasion within the appended progress report. The directional arrows for progress were previously adopted when hard copies of the board papers were printed to avoid the need for coloured copies, but red, amber, green indicator could be adopted in future if preferred. So it's recommended that the board note the purpose and format of the progress report as discussed above and presented in the appendix, and secondly, that they advise on any amendment to this format if required for future board meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I see no questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Reid.
Yeah, thanks very much for this one. It's I've got a question on page 109. So it's the the Inverurie, sorry, the Contour to Blackburn cycle path there, and it says in future actions, the landowner indicated he wishes to rent the land as opposed to sell, which has significant cost implications and is not viable. Alternative options to land access to be reviewed. So it's really, question is, where are we with this? What are our options? Are we talking compulsory purchase?
Go to Martin.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Reid, for the question. Yes, I think all options are on the table. I don't think we have a definitive answer to that yet. I think the negotiations will hopefully still be going on with the landowner. If they are adamant they want to continue with renting, and that isn't the most cost beneficial option, we'll have to look at other options. But what that is at this stage, I'm not in a position to say. I don't think we have got to that stage yet, but we're discussing with colleagues in the legal and property on that one.
Martin, if I can just jump back in, if you don't mind. So option is to go back and negotiate again. I take another option would be possibly compulsory purchase. Are there any other options? That's what I'm trying to get down to get the answer to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the options are we lease the land, we buy the land, or if we can't get an agreement with the landowner, it has to be the CPO option. If that is,
so there's not an alternative route. That's what I'm saying as well.
I think we ruled out the alternative routes previously in the feasibility study. So again, I don't think that's an option.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Colin, would like to come in?
Yeah, thank you. Just say thanks very much for making the changes to the report. You know, the description, current status, and future actions is, I think, are better headings for that. I'm still struggling a bit with the dates. Again, it's just for me, you know, looking at these projects, you know, I don't know. You know, you see some of them slipping from one year into the other, but it's really difficult for me to say to look at this on just by scanning through it to say, right, that one has actually been on there 3 years, or it's been on there 2 years, or it's just, you know, a month behind schedule, or whatever. We must have some sort of plan in place for all these things and when they're supposed to be delivered, rather than just a yearly budget that we're going to, you know, put money to that. I'm sorry if I'm just don't understand the workings of everything, but it seems to me that a project should have a date when we think it should be completed, and if we're going to make that date or not, and that should be fairly simple to put in a report.
Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, the historic position that we're in, where projects have gone from one year to the next, you could look back at old reports to see if they've said we do show where it's been carried forward from 1 year, if you want to show historically if it's gone beyond the 1 year carry forward. The projects that are put up for the budget are all estimated to be deliverable within the year when the budgets are set, because we do just have the single year funding allocation. So that is always the projected delivery date by the end of March. So I could put that in for every single Nestrans funded one if you want.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you know, if you know one is going to be done in June, then do you not just put that? Because what will happen is that ones that are not done, you'll have this massive projects that just turn from one year into the other, rather than saying, yeah, we're going to have that one finished by June, we're going to have that one finished in September, that one in December, etc. And then you can actually see, oh, actually, we're not going to make September on that. It's going to be October, so it's amber because it's only a month or something beyond the time. But if you have them all in as going to be to the end of March, then you're going to be they're all going to be in green until the end of March, and then suddenly go into the next year and be green again because they're into the end of the next year. So it's maybe just me not understanding the way that these projects are put together. I understand they're in a budget, but they must actually have a delivery plan as well. Perhaps not. Take it away and have a discussion with everyone about that.
Yeah,
Again, maybe it's like I say, I'm quite happy to be. It's just my understanding of our project. As I said, that is a date we are going to finish that project. That's the date we're aiming for. We might not make it, but we'll have a reason why we haven't made it, rather than just saying it's going to go to the end of the month, end of the year. And by the way, like 50% of these we haven't made, so they go into next year, but they're all green again because they're going to be in the end of next year's project.
You do have you do have the current status and what the actions are for the following month. So that is always reported. So you'll see the next month if the future actions weren't done and that it's slipped. I suppose we could. Do you want every 2 months between boards? I'm not sure.
If it's a target there, so I mean, if that Inverurie to Aberdeen's contour Blackburn cycleway, if we have a deadline for something that we are doing on that, can we not just put that data in there so that we know when it's going to be and if we're actually going to make it, instead of looking at it on a month-by-month basis saying, oh yeah, there's a little bit of progress in the month, or there's not a bit of progress. Are we actually going to meet the deliverable date that we think we're going to do it, rather than are we going to spend the money in the year? So I'm not going to take it any further. So I mean, I'm quite happy to pop in and discuss it at some time, just the way so you can explain it to me how it all works. That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brad, would like to come in?
Yep, thanks. Just to say, yeah, we're happy to go away and have a chat about it, Colin, see what we can bring forward. And it might be in that generality. As Jenny says, it has been primarily about being a budget progress report. But yeah, if there's an opportunity to look at the projects and put some programme, even if it's in the text around that, we'll see if that can be done. Thanks.
I mean, I can see where you're coming from, Colin. Maybe one option would be to put a start date and a time limit on them. So then you would know if there was overrunning, if you saw the start date, and if it's, say, a 6 months project.
Yeah, the description of the project is always set for the financial year. This is what we hope to do this financial year. So whether it's just design development this year or whether it's into construction, we might have tender dates in, but I will say in maybe the progress updates, it's intended to prepare the tender documentation, and then the future action would be to appoint the tender, start construction. Then 2 months later, you'll see, oh, there was a resource issue that didn't happen. So it's in the text of what's actually planned to happen in the next 2 months, and then at the next board report, well, this is what's actually happened and what might happen. But could at the start of the year, if you want, here's the planned progress for all of them. It's just, it gets messy because not everything in the progress report is Nestrans budget. So I don't know if you want a separate one for just the Nestrans budget at the start of a financial year, saying this is when we plan to do it all, then just use the normal progress. I just wasn't certain which format to use, which was the purpose of this, to see how it could possibly address concerns. But yeah, be welcome. We have advice if you want to have further discussion, Colin. Thanks.
Okay, so if we let the officers talk off table on that one, a bit more about other options on that. At the moment, we'll do the recommendations to the board of 1 and 2 on page 108. Oh, sorry, Councillor Davidson.
I thought I had my hand up at the start. All right. So thanks very much. And I absolutely get what Colin said. I can't actually tell. I'm assuming all these projects haven't been on the list for much more than a year, but they could have been there for years, and I have no way of knowing if they just keep getting shifted over to a new year. So that was just a comment. So I do know where Colin's coming from. So really, the questions that I was originally put my hand up to ask was, page 125 speaks about the Montrose Aberdeen Inverurie corridor, and one of my councillor colleagues asked me to put in a word for Montrose Station and the desperate upgrade that it needs to be a modern, useful station. And the other one was a question about, on page 126, is about in-station accessibility study, and that you were waiting for to hear if it was going to get funding from the Department of Transport, and I wondered if there was any outcome for that yet. I know there wasn't last week when this was put out, but I had understood you did expect it to be last month or so, so I just wondered if there was any more information.
Thanks, Chair. If I can come in, Inch Station, if I can take them in reverse order, that one's gone from Transport Scotland, have made a bid to the DFT for funding. But no, we haven't yet heard whether that's been successful, although we have chased it up, and I'm sure Kelly will continue to do so. You know, because really budgets are getting finalised and coming through now, and probably it is, you know, good timing, and we'll try and get an update for the next meeting, if not before. In terms of Montrose Station, obviously it's out with our area, but yeah, it's a key part of that local rail service. We have regular liaison with Transport Scotland and our rail industry colleagues, and that's one that we can take up with them. I agree with you about the need for improvements there. It has been discussed, it has been promised, but we'll try and get an update on progress around that one.
Okay, Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, just my tuppence worth on the report itself, and I think we should just be clear when we're looking at the report what it is. I always see it as a regional transport strategy progress report as the bigger picture, I guess, across several years. But I think there is merit in having a year-by-year budget approach for some projects. And I just wondered if, just to throw my tuppence worth in, that there would be some kind of maybe a summary, because I think it is very helpful to have this report available for members who want to pick up on individual items, as has happened today. But I don't think it does give the best picture in terms of budget. So I think we would probably need another one.
Okay, Councillor Yule.
Thanks. Find the report very helpful. One bit of hopefully constructive feedback. Just looking at the future actions column throughout the report, quite often the future actions already seem to have happened. For example, on page 123, the future action is Nestrans response was submitted. Page 125, the second one there, RL2 feedback. The future action is feedback received from Transport Scotland, and then officers met with Transport Scotland in December. So that's not really a future action. And the same on page 126, the one that Councillor Davidson referred to about Inch Station. The future action is Inch has been put forward by Transport Scotland. So that again is in the past, but that's maybe in picky, but it is a really helpful and informative report.
Just saying it's only the items that are in bold that are the new information. So that bit where it's saying it's been submitted, the bit in bold saying we're still awaiting feedback. So that's really the latest position with it.
I appreciate that the column's headed future actions.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just being picky, Chair.
Okay, I can't see any other questions, so we'll go to the recommendations 1 and 2 on page 108. That's agreed. And we now move on to publications and consultations with Paul Finch.
Thank you very much, Chair. This board, there's quite a few publications that have come out of life through them, and then we can take any questions at the end if you have any. Sustrans, along with Network Rail, have done some work on sustainable access to travel stations. A strategy for improving sustainable access to stations will be coming out shortly, but in the meantime, they've done a piece of work on the public health benefits of sustainable travel to railway stations. It's quite notable, some of the impacts there nationwide, but still I think that's a demonstration of some of the impacts that you can have in terms of health physical activity in these measures. In terms of the railway, Transport Scotland have published a high-level output statement for what they are expecting from Scotland's railways in the next control period up to 2029. Specific schemes are not mentioned, although they have set some targets around growth of rail freight and seeking to ensure that Scotland's railway do contribute to other goals, such as the reduction in car kilometres target. An important piece of work has been published by Transport Scotland, initiated by the now former Transport Minister Jenny Gilruth, in terms of women's and girls' safety on public transport. It's a very interesting findings from some focus group work that they did in some face-to-face interviews around that gender issue. It may well extend beyond gender issues to anybody who might be travelling, who might have a vulnerability as well, and some recommendations for the rail and wider public transport sector to take into account. But also I think there's some findings there that all people who are designing transport systems should be aware of on that as well. Transport Scotland have published some active travel strategy guidance. Again, it's an update on some previous work. I think it usefully helps concrete what the definition of active travel should be. Journeys made by mode of transport, fully, partially people-powered, irrespective of the purpose of journey, including walking, wheelchairs, cycling, to name but a few. This is timely, because Nestrans itself is doing some work on its own active travel plans, and I do know that some of this work will also feature or influence the work of the two local authorities in terms of their local transport strategies as well. And talk about local transport strategies, guidance on local transport strategies has also been published, again, primarily for the local authorities. We've done our regional transport strategy, but again, some very useful bits of information in there, and we would be intending to provide an officer's response to that by the deadline of 15th of June. Aberdeen City Council are consulting at the moment on planning guidance and supplementary guidance to do with the we hope soon to be a finalised local development plan. Again, one that we're interested in is transport and accessibility. I think our other officers, the Nestrans officers' view is that it does the job, but there might be opportunities where some of the tone perhaps can be updated from the language that, again, much that it's taken from 2017. So it does the job, but there might be improvements that could be made, and we're working on a response to help officers at the City Council do that. Murray Council are consulting on a regional spatial strategy and local development plan. Very early stages at this point, the call for ideas. Obviously, the Grampian region used to include Murray. It is still part of the Grampian Health Board that we are part of. We work with Murray Council on the Health and Transport Action Plan. We work with them closely in terms of the A96 corridor and the rail links through to Inverness. And so we will be hopefully just providing some support for that work in terms of some broad acknowledgement of the key linkages included along the North Coast and on the 96, and some of the shared challenges that we face. CPT Scotland, Confederation of Public Transport, have done some interesting work on bus and coach and how that can contribute the route to net zero. I think the view was if we did things as we were and continued that direction, you would really only get a 17% mode shift towards bus and coach. But I think the ambition was for a far higher mode share increases of around 84% increase on the current baseline. And they have usefully set out a range of policy interventions to do this, including cost, making the behaviour change aspects. And I think some of these things does actually relate very well to our proposals for ART and some of the other work we're doing with the Bus Alliance. Public bodies climate change duties, some of the guidance for that has been updated, probably more for offsetting and insetting, less relevance at the moment, but perhaps in future years we need to be aware of that. And Department for Transport have done some work on a transport data strategy, innovation through data. And perhaps when we see things like the tap on, tap off that we talked about at the beginning of this meeting, you can see how that creates a wealth of information, and I guess the government's view is that that information should be freely available to help us improve services and uptake of innovation in other areas. So a wide range of reading there and publications to bring to the attention of the board, but I'm happy to take any questions on that.
I see no questions at all there. So we move to the recommendations of 12.1, 1 and 2 on page 160, if all agreed. Okay, we'll now move on. Information bulletin by John Barron, sorry.
Thanks very much. This is an update on a number of matters that don't require board decisions. There's a summary of media information and coverage relevant to Nestrans since the last board meeting. It's the first appendix. Get About, our sustainable travel brand, along with partners, continues to have radio adverts promoting sustainable travel choices, as well as the Discover function, the GoAbs app, broadcast across North Sound and Original. Pleased to say that we've also been able to support our first physical event for some time through funding a cycling roadshow, which was part of the Family Fun Day at Hazelhead Park. It was organised with the City Council, Countryside Rangers as part of Climate Week North East. And we've also got some work ongoing for a number of upcoming themes. Kelly, as the volunteer coordinator for the Scottish Hub of Women in Transport, attended an event recently at Scottish Parliament, attended by the then Minister for Transport and a number of others. Nestrans has also recently appointed consultants to produce a comprehensive travel study. It's due to start phone surveys together with a number of focus groups over the coming months. And this commission will help, something that Duncan spoke about earlier in respect to first aspirations, to help Nestrans have a better understanding of how individuals currently travel and what the barriers and opportunities are to achieve a modal shift towards more sustainable forms of travel. E-cargo bikes, members will be aware, to recap, City Council received funding from Transport Scotland a few years ago for a small pool of e-cargo bikes. Bikes arrived in early 2020, timing wasn't ideal. A number of challenges, like everything else globally, over the kind of ensuing period. These bikes are provided free of charge to businesses. The initial focus was to be on the low emission zone. However, we've scoped that, and as you'll see with the update, that they've gone to a number of locations over the period. Have been a number of challenges getting them out to places so that people could use them effectively. However, we're now in the fortunate position where we're beginning to form a waiting list, which is really good. N+1 applies to e-cargo bikes as well. And there's a slight mistake, which I apologise for, at the bottom of page 163. There are actually 4 Christiana trikes that Kevin from Seafine is on in the picture, and there are 2 of the Risa Mullers. The members will also be aware that Nestrans had supported an application previously by NHS Grampian to Sustrans for a workplace engagement officer that was aimed to help promote sustainable travel to major health sites across the North East. This application was successful, and Katrina, the engagement officer, was appointed. Nestrans has continued to work with NHS Grampian and Sustrans on this project, along with the Health and Transport Action Plan Programme Manager, and there is a summary of the monitoring and evaluation for the first year of the project as Appendix 2 to this update. And lastly, Nestrans have again agreed to assist the student on a Sustainable Transitions course with a dissertation. Paul and Adam will be helping to supervise the work, which is focusing on travel needs of the under 25s and around public transport in urban and rural areas. And the recommendations are that board note the contents of the report, and I and some of the other will answer any questions if you have any.
Yes, Councillor Eel.
Thanks, Chair. A question about e-bikes and another transparency statement, would you believe? The 6 bikes went to, well, 6 homes initially and have moved, at least have moved on after the rescoping. Was the placement of the bikes with the initial locations, was that always time limited, or did some try them out and say, nah, this isn't for us, and that therefore that bike became available for a new user? How did that work? And just, if I may, Chair, since reference has been made to the NHS Grampian Workplace Engagement Officer and the funding provided to NHS Grampian, can I make a transparency statement that I am a member of the board of NHS Grampian? Having considered the objective test, I do not consider that I need to leave.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald. Oh, sorry, John, can you go back and answer that one first? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. With regards to timing, it's been varied. Sorry, yeah, with regards to timing
that we can't deliver, and then it comes back. Yes.
I think, John, Councillor Cox, you've got your microphone on. I think we can hear you in the background. Okay, carry on, John. Barron.
Too many Johns. Yeah, no, with regards to timing, it's been varied, Councillor. Some have had it for a number of weeks, and especially during the kind of various restrictions during COVID, it was less suitable for them, let's say. However, I've had no one hand it back or be keen to hand it back. If anything, actually the problem I have is getting them back, because everyone wants to keep them. And that has continued with those that have been given them more recently. Everyone seems to love them for a variety of reasons, and the kind of wide ranges of locations that we've put them to. So the timings have been kind of variable, which is the kind of probably the whole idea of the project at the outset, was that so that we could get these things around to as many homes or potential homes to showcase the many benefits they bring.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. MacDonald.
Yeah, on the e-bikes, I'd like to ask, do we actually monitor how much they are used? I get that people like them and so on, but you know, do we keep it, or is it a note of that, or is it anecdotal? And my second question was around the comprehensive travel study. I just wondered if that was going to come back to us at the board in any future report. Thanks.
I'll maybe take the second one first, and well, possibly even both of them, unless John wants to jump in. Comprehensive travel study, yeah, absolutely. That's the purpose, is to get consultants to do the research, so that we can build up a body of knowledge and information. And the intention would be to bring that back to the board. I'm looking to Kerry, but probably in the autumn. Or certainly before the end of the year would be the intention. In terms of monitoring the e-cargo bikes, yes, when we first put them out in particular, one of the conditions of the loan was that we got a full monthly report on how often it was used, and we then calculated that what carbon was saved, what nitrogen dioxide particulates, etc. As the project has gone on, it's a little bit less focused on the city centre, which was the original purpose. We found that there was interest from businesses and organisations across the region, and we felt it was much more important to have them in use rather than not being used regularly enough. And I think it's fair to say, John, that we've relaxed that requirement a little bit, but the information we're getting back is anecdotal. I think, John, at least one of our respondents or our borrowers provide you with a fairly regular detail of usage, but we're less insistent on getting that on a regular basis because it was acting as a barrier to people using them. We felt it was more important that they were being used. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Davidson.
Yeah, thanks. Actually looked for some information on something that's not on the information bulletin, but I hope this is the right place to bring it up. And it's the announcement that I hadn't realised had happened by Gillian Gilruth about no further dualling of the A90 north of Ellen. And I'm also aware that Nestrans has extended, or the consultants have extended the consultation for the Ellen to Fraser and Peterhead improvement or opinion survey for a bit longer. So I just wondered if there was likely to be any discussions with the new minister about this and what the Nestrans position was likely to be, or is it at the moment undetermined?
Would Paul like to answer that one?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair and Councillor Davidson. Going back towards the beginning of this year, the Scottish Government concluded their Strategic Transport Projects Review, and that was reported to this board in February, I believe. At that point, the STPR2, which sets out Transport Scotland's strategic investment priorities for the next 5 to 10 years, concluded at that point that they weren't going to include the dualling or upgrades of the E90 north of Ellen at that stage. However, they did say it is still open for regional partnerships to make the case for appropriate improvements that fit with the national strategy at that point. So there was then a question in Holyrood, I think that was posed by Liam Kerr, that said, will there be dualling? Again, that was the answer that Jenny Gilruth said was, no, there will not be dualling because it's not in STPR2. But she did go on to say, as a result of that, that she did note that Nestrans, through the funding that we have from the City Region deal, are going down this route of trying to make the case for those improvements as outlined in terms of the regional opportunity that they provided for. So separately, the consultants have been doing an evidence review because it's been a few years since we looked at this in terms of the changing traffic flows, the changing economic strategy, some of the new opportunities that might come ahead with the Acorn project, for example. So that evidence review is continuing. We did extend and we are extending that stakeholder consultation period for another 2 to 3 weeks going forward. And we hope to bring that report back to both, I think it will be a range of committees actually, because I know that the Full Martin Area Committee have expressed an interest in this at Aberdeenshire Council, definitely Nestrans Board and definitely the City Region Deal Board on the progress of that. I think when we have that evidence before us of what has changed, we can then reflect again on the case for change and actually target our asks on those investments which have the best opportunity and most support going forward from there. So there's obviously political movements on this at the moment, but in parallel, there is perhaps a more objective-based evidence and stakeholder consultation process, which we are extending, and we hope to bring back to the committees in the next month or so. We'll have to work out when the end date that might be. I would suspect definitely around June time is the sort of target we have for that, but we'll see how we get on with that. Does that provide the clarification you'd like, Councillor Davidson?
It does. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. So I'd like to thank John and note the board to note the contents of this report in the recommendations. Okay, we move on to item 10, conferences and presentations, and that will be RAB.
Chair, just a number of conferences and presentations starting to come through again. They're listed there for members' information. I did want to mention, though, I think at the previous meeting we discussed an SCDI event with the Transport Minister, Jenny Gilruth, because everyone in the chamber knows she's no longer the Transport Minister, and that post is now held by Kevin Stewart, an ex-chair of the Nestrans Board and a local member. The 26th of April event has therefore been cancelled because Kevin apparently didn't inherit her diary, as I think we maybe expected he would do. But SCDI are keen to still have an event, and I've asked them to let us know when that's possible. I'll get back to the board when we can get some clarification on that. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I see no questions, so it's the recommendation is to note the contents of Appendix 1 and move on to item 11, pending business and reports for future meetings, and that's Rab.
Thanks, Chair. The pending business gives an indication of reports that we've managed to bring forward on today's agenda, and a few that we intend to bring forward over the coming next couple of board meetings. I will add the comprehensive travel survey to that list when we get some information on that. And I was also wondering whether the board think it would be right for us to reach out to the new Transport Minister and see if we could get Kevin to have a presentation and discussion with us. Not least, I guess, about the challenge that has been raised today about the progress and how we move from studies to delivery on many of the projects. And I'm sure that's the sort of thing that he'd be more than willing to speak to us about. So if board are keen on that idea, I'll reach out to his office and see if we can set something up.
Yes, I think that'd be well agreed between the board. That would be very useful. We can get him to come and give us a meeting up here somewhere. And Jerry Donald.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Rab. That's exactly the point I was going to bring up. I think we should be proactive with the Transport Minister and invite him to meet with us and have a well organised, rehearsed programme for that meeting with Kevin Stewart. I think that would be welcome by him and certainly by us. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. That's no other questions. So the recommendation is for the board to note the report on the pending business. So that is the end of today's proceedings. Thank you everyone for coming today and attending, and we'll see you again 21st of June.